prepared for works returned from Paris. The space and neoclassical interior make the Braccio Nuovo a perfect site for most famous sculptures in the history of art. The Dora Forest by Polyclitus, the Wounded Amazon, and Augustus of Prima Porta are a few examples of the treasures exhibited in this room. The Nile River, a jewel in the crown of the collection of Julius II, dominates the room. It is a Roman work of art from the 2nd century, found near the church of Santa Maria sopra Minerva, and donated to the museum in 1512. The Egyptian river is represented by a man reclining on a block of marble. He is holding ears of corn, symbol of the fertile plain of the Nile River. Subtly carved details recall the river vibrant with life, from the papyrus leaves to exotic animals. The tiny figures of infants frolicking around the man symbolize good fortune. They stand for 16 cubits, the height of the optimal level of the river's freshet to ensure abundant crops. And yet, despite so many successes, the times of the papacy's patronage was drawing to an end. The world was changing rapidly, and the papal state began to decline while the very church was more and more marginalized in the age to come. Despite the fact that Pius VII showed mercy and compassion to the exiled family of Napoleon, they received accommodation and maintenance in a Roman palace. In the second half of the 19th century, the papacy would be in the same position. The unification of Italy put an end to the long history of the Pope ruler. The proclamation of the dogma of the Immaculate Conception on December 8, 1854, was the most important religious event of that century. Blessed Pope Pius IX declared that the Virgin Mary was kept free from original sin from the moment of her conception. The task to record this historic moment in a fresco was confided to Francesco Podesti, who was inspired with Raphael's Disputation and painted a work where the Fighting Church and the Triumphant Church meet at the altar. Podesti arranged the characters of the fresco on two levels. The top one occupied by Mary in the iconography of the Immaculate Conception, dressed in a white gown and blue robe, surrounded by rejoicing saints. Below is the papal court listening to Pius XI, who is proclaiming the dogma at St. Peter's Basilica. Despite the loss of earthly powers, the Pope's authority concerning faith and morals remains unchanged. It is represented by St. Peter's throne, linking the two levels of the fresco. On the adjacent wall, Podesti depicted the church paying homage to the Virgin Mary. Laic noblemen, monks, and prelates surround the Pope, who is offering incense to the Blessed Virgin in the chapel of the Immaculate Conception at St. Peter's Basilica. Among the splendid gathering of upper-class persons, one may not miss the tiny group in the bottom corner of the fresco. A woman mother, dressed in the style of the Chiocciaria region, is drawing her son's attention to the image of Madonna. The woman and her baby boy direct the viewer's sight toward the Pope. Podesti's composition bonds the Church from the faithful to the Pope through their common prayer to Mary, the Mother of God. The last years of the 19th century were disastrous for the papacy and Vatican museums. The endless tug-of-war between the papacy and the new Italian state lasted for 59 years, till February the 11th, 1929, when Pope Pius XI and the Prime Minister of Italy, Benito Mussolini, signed the Lateran Pax. The 59-year age of Pope's prisoners in the Vatican, the expropriation of the Church's property and the churches, and the drastic reduction of the Vatican's income did not force the Church to renounce the role of a guardian of culture and beauty created by human beings. On February the 12th, 1932, the Vatican museums were reopened to the public with a new face, a huge double-entry ramp designed by Giuseppe Momo. Opening a pavilion at the International Exposition of 1925, Pope Pius XI drew the attention of viewers to 100,000 exhibits from all over the world, and thus emphasized the universal mission of the Church. The objects gave rise to the Missionary Ethnological Museum, opened soon after the end of the exposition. Expanding the collection to include more than just Western art, the Church turned to artifacts of various cultures. The collections of the Missionary Ethnological Museum contained a huge and diversified number of artifacts, from Buddhist temples to ancestor masks from Oceania. The richness of the objects and products related to ancient rites and local cults is a sign of Pope's encyclopedic interest. Ahead of the Internet in a way, missionaries collected pieces of information on far-off peoples, sharing them with the gospel of Jesus Christ. What about the long tradition of European art? 20th century artists learned to despise sacred topics and principles formulated by Raphael and Michelangelo. The patronage was set aside. Artists negated what they perceived as obstacles set by tradition and directed their artistic visions deeper and deeper into their inside. No longer able to commission art as in the past, and facing the world which turned away from figurativeness and transcendence, how was the Church supposed to conduct its dialogue with art? The present used a new, incomprehensible artistic language. In the West, the art of the 20th century gave up sacred topics, figurativeness and tradition, and formed new directions, abstract art and expressionism. But after over 1,000 years of art patronage, the papacy did not give up building bridges between art and faith. In 1956, Pope Pius XII was already thinking of including works of modern art in the museum collections, starting from landscapes and non-figurative works to avoid an iconographic conflict with the Church's teaching. A campaign began to obtain donations, works of modern art, and in 1960 Pope John XXIII could assign 2 rooms to modern art collections. The famous French painter, Georges Rouault, gave the Autumn, a painting much more cheerful than his famous depictions of the Passion. The painter Giorgio Morandi, from Bologna, donated a series of still lifes which emanated with peace due to their subdued colors and subtle light. The actions taken by John XXIII strongly influenced the prodigal sons of art. Giacomo Manzu, a self-taught sculptor from Bergamo, was fascinated with the Pope being receptive to art and started to cooperate with him on many projects, in particular the Chapel of Peace, now in the Gallery of Modern Art. Simple and crude liturgical vessels from a series of dynamic golden lines on a white background. Manzu and John XXIII reunited art and liturgy. Even in the theologically turbulent 60s, art could still supplement liturgy.
La collaborazione tra Manzu e Papa Giovanni XXIII riunì l'arte e la liturgia. Anche nella decade teologicamente turbolenta degli anni 60, l'arte poteva essere ancora complemento ai sacramenti.
Pope Paul VI opened the museum to art of other religions, receiving the third allegory by a Hebrew painter, Ben Shahn. Using seemingly primitive brushstrokes, Shahn creates a beast with a lion's head, carrying the 10 Commandments tablets. A figure in a prayer shawl is blowing the shofar, a horn used in Old Testament religious ceremonies of the Jubilee year, when one would reconcile with God and people. On April the 8th, 1994, when the restoration of the Sistine Chapel was completed, the Vatican Museums took a crucial step to become the caput mundi of art again. The Blessed John Paul II, who was elected in 1978 under the Sistine Chapel frescoes, darkened over centuries, began conservation works to take 16 years. Centuries-old deposits of dust, candle soot, and residues of earlier conservations were removed. He opened the restored chapel and emphasized the significance of relations between art and faith in the homily. The effect was amazing. Light and color returned to the Sistine Chapel, and interest in the collections of the Vatican Museum flourished again. Visitors to the chapel, immersed in the sophisticated novelties of modern art, are smitten with the power and directness of 500-year-old pictures, which draw them into the stories told by the frescoes. On the altar wall, the central point of the chapel, Michelangelo painted the Last Judgment. He captured both heroism and transcendence. The fresco inspired fear and at the same time was filled with hope. From above the cross, standing on the altar, angels are blowing trumpets to announce the end of the world and are holding two books to separate good deeds from evil ones. In the bottom left-hand part of the fresco, a tangle of small dark bodies are jostling, shrinking, and stretching themselves, rising from the dead. Though strong, their bodies compared to the others seem small and dark, and as figures climb up, they become brighter and bigger. Higher, they get help. Hands are reaching to them to lift them and carry up. The community offers mutual support with a view to redemption. All of them are welcome. Men and women, black and white, are going up. Painting his paradise, Michelangelo broke with conventions, discarded traditions. Neither pastel robes nor golden halos distinguish the elect anymore. Michelangelo gives them the bodies of ancient athletes,